Love and Death in Paris, 97 by Eric Hamilton. Hi, Eric. Welcome to our interview.
Thanks, Marian.
We're you're a very experienced writer. You've been writing for over 45 years. You've written 22 novels for young audiences. They've been published in 10 languages. You've sold 2 million copies in Canada. You've personally met over 500,000 of your young readers in the elementary schools throughout Canada, every province and territory you've traveled to, as well as to the United States, Washington and New York states. That's a huge audience that you have. And this novel, Love and Death in Paris, 97, is your first for adult readers. Can you tell us about your journey as a writer to this book?
Well, it's quite an interesting process, and part of it, I think, means that I have taken those 500,000 kids and said, do not read this book. That's why it's by Eric Hamilton,
Right.
because it is a novel for adults. It's not suitable for kids. But I did want to write a book that would capture what my wife Flo and I loved about Princess Diana, and so many people have loved about her. I wanted to try to remember her as a contemporary, because a time will come when all of us who lived at the time of Diana will be gone, but she will still be a person who is written about, movies are made about, television shows are shot about. But I wanted to capture what it is that we have all loved about Diana.
And this book is also a thriller. It's a romance. It's a very beautifully detailed portrayal of a historic world event, the events of August 1997, 20 years ago now. Plus, it's a love letter to the city of Paris. Can you tell me, you researched this novel for over 2 years, so I learned a lot of things about that event. What scene in it moved you the most?
Well, it's like a documentary in the sense that everything to do with Diana is based on fact, and I did take 2 years to research it. And so I came across many moving moments concerning her death and the great sense of loss that was shared by the entire world. And one scene that particularly moves me is when, after she had died and she was still in the hospital in Paris, and Prince Charles and her two sisters arrive in Paris to come and take her home to England. And a large crowd has gathered outside the hospital, including Daniel Plain, who's the narrator of the story. And so Prince Charles arrives, the two sisters arrive, and they go inside the hospital. And there's this huge crowd of people, totally silent except for people sobbing. And some number of patients come out of the hospital and gather as well, with their intravenous lines and the nurses. And then Charles comes out with the two sisters and the casket covered with the flag. And it is taken and placed into a hearse. And as the hearse slowly drives away with Charles in it with her, as the hearse slowly drives away, the audience, the people, not the audience, the crowd begins to applaud. And then someone calls out, "We love you, Diana." And to me, because that's very true, exactly what happened, it captured that one person who said, "We love you, Diana." We all loved her, and he spoke for all of us.
That's beautiful. So, Eric, the theme of this novel is forgiveness. Can you elaborate on this?
Well, you know, in all of my books that I've written for kids, young people, there is always a theme, something that I'm writing about, something. I'm a teacher, and I'm a teacher who writes. And so in this novel, I wanted to also teach. And to me, forgiveness is such an important message to give to people. And so Daniel becomes friends with a woman named Joy, it's not a secret, it's really my wife Flo as far as I'm concerned, because I adore her. And he comes to get to know her. And through her, they talk about forgiveness. And he's had a very troubled relationship with his father. And then through Joy, he meets Jean Vanier, who, of course, is a real person, a Canadian who set up the ARC, which is for a worldwide organization to support and help people who are mentally challenged. And so he meets Jean Vanier, and he starts talking about his father. Jean Vanier says, "Did you ever see your father cry?" Daniel's taken aback. What does this mean? And yes, he does remember a time. And so he sees his father in a different way because he tells what happens, why his father was crying. And shortly after, he phones his father back in Bellingham, Washington, and they essentially forgive each other. And I hope through that scene that people do understand how important forgiveness is in our world, not anger and hostility. The way to peace is through forgiveness.
That's a beautiful theme of the novel, and we see it in other relationships as well. In terms of the book itself is actually not a book. It's could you tell us how, if anyone wished to read your book, how they do that?
Well, it is a Kindle book, and so therefore it's available to people throughout the world, which is very nice. It's a great invention in a sense, because here we are in Victoria, but anyone anywhere in the world can read the book through Kindle. And Flo and I have found that a large part of the audience for the book is in the Middle East, which we find quite interesting, because there is a Facebook page, and of course people who come to the Facebook page, you can tell where they're from, and a lot of them are from the Middle East, which is interesting. A lot of people in Canada, the USA, and England. Those are the three areas where most of the books have been sold, but the rest of the world as well. There are people who are interested in the book when they learn about it, and of course Princess Diana was loved worldwide.
Indeed. So Eric, as an aspiring writer myself, can you give me your number one tip or tips for an emerging writer out there?
So I'd be very happy to do that, and my advice would be don't write unless you write for the love of it. Do not write for money. I meet many people who say, "What advice do you have?" And I always say, "Why do you want to write?" And at least half the people say, "Well, I want to make money." Better to get a job selling real estate, whatever, to make money. Do not write for money, because that is not going to work. Write for the love of words. And secondly, I would suggest, do not make the mistake I made. I wrote several books before I suddenly thought, wait, maybe there's someone else who's done this before me I can learn from. I went to the public library, looked for books on the craft of writing. There's a wealth of them. The number one book I would recommend is written by Stephen King. He wrote about how to write, the craft of writing. It's a wonderful book. There's another one called Making a Good Script Great, and it's written by a Hollywood scriptwriter, a script doctor, I should say, who repairs scripts. And the thing is, with every novel, every story, there's 3 acts. And the tough act is, Act 1 is the setup, Act 3 is the payoff. The tough one to write is Act 2.
On that note, Eric, thank you. I'm Marian Paris, and it's been my pleasure to be with you today. Thank you very much for watching.